Hey everybody, this is Texas State Representative Trey Martinez Fischer. Welcome to Politics, all things Texas. What a week. We're at that point in the session where things are moving crazy. It is, we're working long hours, we're working every day. We worked on Saturday, so this is usually the time of the year where, most of us are beginning to feel the pressure of the session. Working on a Saturday on Mother's Day weekend is really not a way to start the weekend, if you know what I mean. And so if you're watching the video portion of this pod, then just by looking at my hair, you'll know this is a crazy session where you can't even make it to the barbershop to get a haircut on time because it's that crazy. We've got a few things to talk about, and we're going to depart from the normal Q&A and in the interviews because it's just been that kind of a week. But really, in thinking about what is the best way to sort of, give you a sense of what happened in Austin this past week? I think I'm going to tee up a couple of floor speeches, and this will really give you a sense of where we are and where we might be going these next couple of weeks. And so this week, I would just say this is what we call the wedge war week of the legislative session, when you can think about the things that divide us the most, the things that separate it's not even just separating Republicans and Democrats. It's just separating, folks that want to be realistic and pragmatic and want to work on policy versus those who just want to focus on politics, right? So it's either good policy or bad politics. And I think this week, Republicans and the folks in charge chose to have a week of what I would call bad politics. This week, we had to have considerable debate and on what we're calling a heartbeat bill, which is another attempt to attack women and attack women's health. It's definitely it's an overt threat to the law of the land in Roe v. Wade. This is really the state of Texas saying we want to have the first abortion case before the United States Supreme Court. And so you're going to hear from my colleague, Representative Donna Howard, who's number one, just a fantastic lawmaker. Number two, has tremendous talents that she works very hard on her budget. She pretty much knows where every dollar in, every dollar out. And that's kind of what she has made her reputation for being one of our best advocates on our state budget. But she's also had to spend considerable time combating attacks on women's health. And so you're going to hear from her floor speech, which I think is a very very frustrated lawmaker. I think she shares the sentiment of the rest of us. But I think when you listen to her remarks, it's coming at a time, as I've just mentioned, this is a week where, we are working around the clock. We are competing against the legislative calendar, which is running to the end. As a matter of fact, this Thursday will be the last day to debate House bills on second reading. So this is really, to use a football analogy, this is the fourth quarter. And so everybody's sucking it up. And we're working, with limited sleep. We're working, just sort of with exhausted bandwidth, and tensions and emotions are high. And so when you listen to her speech, you'll get a sense of how frustrated we are with these attacks on women's health. But coming from a nurse with a healthcare background, you're going to hear firsthand, from a mother and a grandmother, that this isn't a fight between Republicans and Democrats. This is a fight between some overzealous folks that want to intrude on a women's health and women's privacy. And I think that's what you're going to hear. You're also going to hear a speech that I made during House Bill 6, Senate Bill 7, which is the infamous voting rights attack that you've probably saw the last several days in local news, national news, NPR, wherever you went for your news source, even on Twitter, you probably heard about House Bill 6, SB 7, which is a solution that's looking for a problem. And I'm telling you, it is a solution in desperate search of a problem. Make no mistake, the Texas Secretary of State made it very, very clear that the 2020 election was safe and secure. There were no allegations of fraud. President Trump, who is, trying to, sound the alarm to anybody who would listen, to indicate that the election was stolen from him. Well, he won in the state of Texas. And so, clearly not an instance where this guy is crying over spilled milk. But yet Republicans seem to believe that despite the fact that they won the presidency in Texas, despite the fact that they held on to their state legislative majority in the House, the fact that they actually won a seat in Congress at the expense of there was a seat that was predicted to go to a Democrat. Despite those gains, despite making historic gains in South Texas with Hispanic voters, Republicans seem to think that there's some kind of fraud going on. So here we are with House Bill 6, Senate Bill 7. It's a racist policy, number one. Number two, it is nothing. It is designed to do one thing and one thing only, to keep people from voting. We're talking about a law that says it's not going to be against the law for our county in San Antonio. As you know, Bexar County made the decision during COVID to make sure that every eligible voter over the age of 65 would receive an application to vote by mail. So whether you're a Republican, Democrat, Green Party, Libertarian, no party, if you were 65 years of age or older, you received an application in the mail saying, check this box, fill out this form, we will send you your ballot and you can vote at home. That would now be illegal under this proposal. What would also be illegal now is for election judges to be able to maintain order at the election polls. A lot of this legislation gives these newfound powers to what they're calling poll watchers, election observers. And the law makes it very clear that we're going to put these people in the room. They have the right to practically look over your shoulder and see how you vote. And they have the right to tell and report to anybody who will listen if they think that there are some irregularities going on. So think about that for a minute. All of a sudden, we're going to bring some volunteers out of nowhere. They're going to come to our elections. They're going to look over your shoulder and they're going to, bring in authorities if they think that you're doing something wrong. I mean, I've been voting for a long time in Bexar County. I've been on the ballot for 20 years. And, those of us in elected office, we are constantly making the rounds at the polling sites. This is a new frontier. It makes you want to scratch your head. Why are we doing this? But if you look into the evidence, you'll see in areas like Houston, there are groups that are known as the King Street Patriots. And these are, sort of ultra conservative, Tea Party types that will organize and assume these, these volunteers, these militia, if you will, and they will go to communities of color and they will use this as a means of voter suppression, as a means of voter intimidation. And so we have to look at this for what this is. Again, is just a dumbfounded solution, desperately looking for a problem. But Democrats weren't going to take it. We fought all night. For those of you that followed the debate, we debated this into 3 o'clock in the morning the very next day. And so just to be very, very clear, we came in that morning at 10 a.m. and we stayed till 3 a.m. the following morning. And then we're back in the office again by 10 a.m. that same day. So when it comes to voting rights, we're not going to back down. We're not going to let down. But again, this is what we're dealing with. And so you're going to see a speech from me that just, sort of just captured the moment, captured the frustration, and made it very clear that, okay, when it comes to voting rights, it does not matter who has the political majority. That doesn't matter. What matters is whether the laws you seek to pass comply with federal law, the United States Constitution, and the Voting Rights Act. And so you're going to see, a pretty frustrated representative from San Antonio make it very clear that we look forward to seeing the Republicans and Republican-backed House Bill 6, Senate Bill 7, that we look forward to seeing you in federal court, because it doesn't matter. You may win today, you may have the votes today, but when it comes to being in the United States District Court, when it comes to being in federal court on a challenge of voting rights, we are all equal. And so that's the point that I made in that speech. So listen to those two speeches. That'll give you a flavor of our week. And then I'll have to tell you that if that wasn't enough, we ended our week with really some bad politics getting in the way of some policy decisions that had already been made with respect to transgender youth. I'm sure you've been following in the news about reports. There were state proposals, legislation filed and considered that would give UIL athletes, and when they're competing in UIL sports, that you could only compete in the sport based on the gender that was associated to you at the time of your birth. That bill was killed. That bill was dead. That bill was declared DOA, not going to happen in the House Committee on Public Ed. And that was a good thing. We've had on this pod, we had a pod on transgender rights. We had some advocates, we had a mother, we had a lawmaker sort of talk about these attacks on LGBTQ individuals. And, so we were pretty proud of the fact that the House Committee on Public Ed said no to this issue. There was a meltdown this week or this past week with regard to that chairman, Harold Dutton, who had a proposal to really, they call this the Houston ISD takeover, and there's been, a long associated, controversy at the Houston Independent School District with regard to their school board members, their school board governance, and there's so much going on. I don't profess to know everything, but suffice it to say is there seems to be a concern by Chairman Dutton about the ongoing leadership and the confidence in the leadership of the Houston Independent School District. He had a proposal to sort of take that board and put them under the state's authority with the Texas Education Agency, and debated this week, was a proposal to do just that. And it was effectively killed by members of his own delegation from Harris County, specifically Dr. Alma Allen, who's also on public education, who also is a public education advocate. And so what you really saw is sort of a Houston fight. Dr. Allen prevailed in not letting the legislation to go forward that would have taken over the Houston Independent School District. And sort of in return, the very following day, the House Public Education Committee reconsidered the transgender ban, and this time it happened to vote out of committee with Chairman Dutton's support. And I've not talked to Chairman Dutton. I know Chairman Dutton, he certainly deserves the right to explain his own actions, but what has been reported is that he believes that the harm in this transgender proposal is not as significant as the harm that's taking place right now to children in the Houston Independent School District. And if there's decisions made to sort of scuttle his public policy as related to the greater Houston Independent School District, well, then he's not going to get in the way of protecting transgender children. I think that's just, number one, that's just out of bounds. It is just not what we should be doing. And so I'm very disappointed in that. I think that, many members of the Texas legislature, specifically members of the public education community that serve as Democrats on that committee, are obviously livid and very concerned. And of course, children, children don't deserve these kinds of attacks. And that's what, at the end of the day, take the politics out of it, take where you stand on this issue, and just think about the humanity with respect to our children. They don't deserve this. And we've heard enough people this session. We shouldn't be piling on. And so, in the final days that we have to consider these proposals, I hope, cooler heads prevail. I hope we're able to honor the fact that this committee's already rejected this policy and we don't see it moving forward on the House floor. And so, that's in essence that's just 1 week. So we have a much different week going forward. It'll continue to be rough. This coming Thursday is a major deadline. Will be the last day to consider House bills on second reading. And so all of that says is that no matter, what kind of idea you have, if that idea originated in the House and it's making its way through the committee process and finds its way getting scheduled to be on the floor, if it is not heard by midnight or 11:59 Thursday, this coming Thursday, it cannot be heard for the remainder of this session. So this is a very big week. We're going to be on edge. I look forward to giving you an update. Please listen to these speeches. Please give me some feedback. And don't forget to continue to follow us on social media at TMFTX. That's TMFTX. That's both on Facebook and on Twitter. Thank you for supporting Politics. This show is actually growing. Very humbled by the feedback we're getting. And thanks to you, we have more listeners every week. And so let's just keep doing. We're gonna keep doing this show as long as it's informative, as long as it's working. And so far, from everything I see, it seems to be a success. So thank you for listening. Enjoy the show, and we will see you next week on Politics. Thank you for listening. If you have a suggestion for the show or an idea for a potential episode, I value your feedback. Email your suggestions to at TreyMartinezFischer.com. As always, thank you for listening to Politics.
The chair recognizes Mr. Martinez Fischer to speak against the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. What I would say is we spend a lot of time on voting rights in my time here. And if you calculated the amount of time we have debated from voter ID to redistricting to phantom problems, and if we were to just apportion a fraction of that time to Medicaid expansion, to the fact that our foster care system sits in a federal courtroom in Corpus Christi, and we would rather let a federal judge fix our foster care program because you want to fix an election system that's not broken. If we spent a fraction of the time looking for the $50 billion that left our constituents' pockets in 4 days of a winter freeze, to bring that money back to our communities, we could solve that problem. But instead, we're going to focus on an election system that is not broken. We are going to lose $100 billion in an 1115 waiver, which, by the way, is next year. Incidentally, has a few billion in this budget. And we're going to ignore that and say we will deal with it mañana, because we're going to fix a problem that doesn't exist. That's what we're doing here. So, Representative Kane, you have your vote, you have your majority. But guess what? I look forward to seeing you in federal court. What I know from my days of voting rights in this chamber, you may have the vote today, but we are all equal in federal court. And history's on our side. Intent is on our side. So please do not delete any emails. What I want folks to know is the things you don't get to see, because we sat idle for 3/4 of a day. Look at the calendar. We have about 24 days left before we go home. So the 3/4 of the day we spent yesterday is the equivalent of about 2 weeks in legislative business. And we sat there and did nothing while we waited and we waited and we waited and we waited. And then we took up this proposal. Folks are tired, and they should be. Folks are grouchy, and they should be. Folks want to get some sleep, and they should. And we come up with a proposal, and Representative Kane refused this body, not just Democrats, everybody, the courtesy to explain what these changes were doing. Now, I'm a big boy, and I can read. So I understand that I have my ability to go find this language and read it and understand it, but the members of the public, our staffs, the voting rights advocates that don't get paid to be here, they have a right to know what was happening. And so to simply take the microphone and say, Senate Bill 7, move passage, that's not our standard. That's not how we do business here. I have the votes, therefore I don't have to explain. That's not cool. I don't care where you are on this vote. Members, you have to remember that people will treat you the way you let them. And when we start letting each other get up here on the most fundamental, the most sacred, the only thing we should really be caring about when it comes to human life, human dignity, that's that right to be heard at every election when you get to walk in that room and mark your ballot. And we can't even get the member to explain to us with a straight face what these changes do. So what? It was 3 o'clock in the morning. We were here. And we're here now. And there's no reason why on third reading, Chairman Kane, and maybe when he closes, this is my invitation when he closes, tell us what we're doing. Tell the people on the third floor gallery what we're doing. It's not about this gotcha. It's about make your argument, take your vote. If you think you're making the right vote, well, then make it. But on voting rights, there's going to be an instant replay. Unfortunately, that replay is not going to be concerned about the color of the lights. Fortunately, that replay is not going to be concerned about whether you tabled an amendment, whether you adopted an amendment, whether it was second reading, third reading, and back hall. That doesn't matter. What's going to matter is did witnesses get the opportunity to be heard when Senate Bill 7 came up and they didn't? What's going to matter is when you start a vote and you know you're going to lose, you quit. I've taken hundreds of votes in this building. Ms. T's probably taken thousands. I have never seen a vote stop unless the bell didn't ring and we had to start all over. And that was rare. What's going to matter is the process. What's going to matter is how we treated each other. What's going to matter is how we treated people who wanted to be heard. That's what's going to matter. So how you vote your light is of little concern to me. Think about the dignity of this process. Think about the respect we owe each other to explain exactly what we're doing, whether you want to or not. I heard somebody say, and I will not out him, I heard someone say that when you bring a bill to the floor, you have to defend it. And it wasn't a Democrat. And I believe that. You want to carry SB 7, House Bill 6, you better be ready to prepare, to explain it, to defend it, and when you change it, show the respect to the body that you're going to tell them what these changes are going to do. And so, but it should also be recognized and acknowledged that there are a number of men and women standing up here, they didn't care. They would have stayed all night to fight for the right to vote. And that began with the hardworking men and women that serve on the Elections Committee. They were pressing the leadership every single step to let them know when the I's weren't dotted, the T's weren't crossed. That goes to our caucus leaders that were pressing negotiations, that we spent 3/4 of a day trying to negotiate. That kept everybody else to maintain the floor and the schedule to make sure everybody was doing what they were supposed to be doing. And I must say, when we all thought this was falling apart, many of us were sitting in the back room, in the corner, reading the book, debating on who had the better point of order. And I saw somebody get out of his chair because negotiations were on life support. So I told Chairman Canales, I really appreciate the fact that while you had your other problems and other things to worry about, you were willing to get up and go revive those conversations. But make no mistake, this took this bill from very ugly to just ugly. There's not a single Democrat that's going to vote for it, and for good reason. But what I cannot understand is that we have a bill sitting today with 76 votes, R's and D's, saying let's fix our health care program. We can't even get to the floor. And that's the true irony. And that's what's wrong with this process. I like to say in the old days, we took care of the people's business. And if you want to lock the door and fight like hell for 30 days, I'm game. Just tell me when and where. But when the people's business is not being done and we divert ourselves to these red herrings of problems that don't exist, we are not serving our constituents. We are not serving Texas. And frankly, we're not serving ourselves. So I hope you think about this, regardless of how you vote, with the time we have left on the clock and the things we have to tackle, where we are actually in the same solar system. Let's fix them while we can. Let's get done with this nonsense. Let's get it over into conference, and let's fix some problems. Vote no on this.
The chair recognizes Representative Howard to speak against the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members. I'm not going to belabor yesterday's discussion. I just want to be clear on what we're voting on today. Senate Bill 8, which some have referred to as the Forced Pregnancy Act, will absolutely force most, if not all women, to carry their pregnancies to term because it does not rely on any actual science. And what's worse is that this bill will drive women back into the shadows in fear of harassment through lawsuits that anyone in this country can file. First and foremost, we're voting on a bill that enshrines personal beliefs over science. This ban on abortion at 6 weeks gestation is truly a ban on practically all abortions and just totally ignores the reality of women's bodies. Gestational timelines don't align with more commonly understood pregnancy timelines. ACOG, the gynecologists and obstetricians, they start counting gestation from the first day of a woman's last menstrual period. They also state that pregnancy is assumed to start 2 weeks after that day. The reality is that it usually takes missing a period before women start to even consider whether they're pregnant or not. That would be at about 2 weeks gestation at the earliest, which is when pregnancy is assumed to start. And in actuality, it will take at about 4 to 6 weeks gestation when women really start to notice that they've missed their period. This is why doctors are so opposed to the 6-week ban. It does not make any medical sense. The truly egregious provisions of this bill are its legal provisions. Cases of rape, incest, and sexual assault. The First Amendment by Representative Slauson yesterday only optically provides protections to victims of rape, incest, and sexual assault. The language clearly states that only rapists and other abusers who are prohibited by sections of the penal code are disallowed from bringing a civil suit against a victim. That means this only applies to rapists who have an actual conviction or an allegation against them. The reality is that 90% of women, 92% in Texas, do not report that they have been raped. Of those reports, only 3% of rapists are actually convicted. 1 in 6 women have experienced sexual assault, and nearly 75% of those cases are perpetrated by non-strangers, including intimate partners and relatives. This is partly why so many cases do not go reported. This bill will only affect those tiny percentages. This leaves the vast majority of victims unprotected from their abusers. And the amendment narrowly applies to the civil cause of action. If you were raped, if you are a victim of incest or sexual assault and you don't want to carry that baby to term, too bad. You will have to do that under this bill. To make matters worse, the civil cause of action is so broad that women will live in fear of legal harassment. Under this bill, you criminalize legal medical procedures and place huge liabilities on providers. And let's be clear, you're not just placing those liabilities on physicians who actually perform the abortion. For example, if a person became pregnant as a result of sexual assault and the rape counselor provided information to the victim about how to obtain an abortion, the rapist could sue the rape counselor. The rapist could sue the doctor who provided the abortion and anyone, including a family member of the victim who supported the victim in accessing an abortion. This is what the language that allows people all over the country to sue anyone who, 1, performs the abortion, 2, aids or abets in the abortion, or 3, intended to aid and abet in the abortion. These terms are so vague that they can apply to almost anything. Here's an example for all of the rural members who advocate for your rural hospitals, given that Texas has the most rural hospital closures in the country. In 2019, 0.001% of all Texas abortions were done in a hospital. This is because hospitals do not perform abortions that are not medical emergencies. Instead, your hospitals are going to refer out to other facilities that actually do perform abortions. So, under this bill, that would be interpreted as aiding or abetting an abortion. That's a huge liability. That is particularly bad given that there's a floor of $10,000 for fees that can be claimed against each and every defendant in a case. These frivolous lawsuits can ask for whatever amount they want, and it would be allowed under this law, and that is for each and every defendant. We know that rural hospitals are already set to lose millions of dollars in funding once DSRIP ends at the end of this fiscal year. Imagine being in fear of being held liable for who knows how much money just because you're doing your job and referring out a person who may want an abortion when you're not even the one performing the abortion. That is a chilling effect that you're placing on women and on facilities and on all types of providers. I will close by saying that I hope you listen to this, and while I understand how you may feel personally, I want you at least to know that this is what you're voting into state law. This bill empowers rapists and abusers. This bill empowers lawyers and trolls who want to abuse and clog up our courts. This bill completely ignores medical science and undermines physicians and providers. And most importantly, this bill, this Forced Pregnancy Act, disrespects women, puts us in harm's way, totally disregards our agency and autonomy, and drives us back into the shadows. As I said yesterday, this bill will not stop abortions.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed those speeches. We look forward to getting back with normal content in the coming week. Send your suggestions to us at TMFTX and follow us on social media at TMFTX on both Facebook and Twitter.